of all the different levers you can pull to help this particular problem, he thought that was absolutely immense.
A silly one I would bring in is limit gym time. So like max 2 hours of gym per week for Rory McIlroy.
It's like bifurcation kind of really already exists.
Okay, right, let's chat about one of the hottest topics in golf at the minute from an equipment perspective anyway, specifically the golf ball and this model local rule that the RNA and the USGA are proposing for the start of January 2026, which will see professional golfers in elite level tournaments using a different golf ball, a sort of limited performance golf ball in these events. Now, Neil, could you clarify what the sort of parameters are here, what their testing has been, and what they might be limiting specifically?
Yeah, they're effectively what they're doing is when they're testing the golf balls, they're going to up the swing speed. They're upping it for this purpose to 127 miles per hour and setting it so that it has a launch characteristics of, I think it's 11 degrees and 2,200 RPM. And when it's set to those with those parameters, the ball cannot go further than 317 yards. So, and what they're saying is that it will be a reduction for the longest hitters of around about 14 or 15 yards. So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the likes of Rory McIlroy being reined in by 14 or 15 yards. For other golfers who are less fast, it will be, I guess, incrementally less than that, the difference.
Thank you. Good clarification on that, because I think that's something we have to understand before we get into this debate. And now one of the biggest problems is what this would do is bring bifurcation into golf, i.e. professional golfers using different equipment to amateurs and what we would use, which very few professional sports do. I think a lot of people aren't particularly keen on. So I don't know where to start this debate really, because it's the distance debate, isn't it? And it's, do we have a problem with professional golfers hitting the ball very far, which they are doing? I hate very few things in life. Aston Villa, kidney beans in Chile, don't like those things. Would say I hate them, but it's a very strong word. However, I hate this proposal. I really, really think it is just sort of backward. There are hundreds of things that needs to be fixed in golf at the minute. This is outside of those 100 things. Golf's in a good spot at the minute, and I don't know why we're toying with this specific part. But Joel, let's talk about distance. Do you think it's a problem in the game? Because I don't even think, listen, if Rory McIlroy, as he just has done at the match play Austin, hit a 359-yard drive to 10 feet, that's brilliant. I want to watch that. And he has earned the right to do that by having such a good golf swing and spending time in the gym. So do you think this is an issue, basically, the distance debate? Before we come on to the ball bit specifically, is distance a problem in the game?
I think if distances continue as they are, it could get to a point where it gets a bit ridiculous. I take your point about Rory. We saw Bryson as well at Bay Hill hitting that shot over the lake, and these rules, from 2026 onwards essentially mean we're not going to see something like that, which I think is a massive, negative for the viewing experience. We're often talking about the product that people are watching and how it's kind of not as good as it used to be. And with these moments not happening, I think the product is therefore kind of diluted and it's definitely not as exciting. I am a bit on the fence. In preparation for this podcast, I wrote down a list of pros and cons for this rule. Nice. I have to say the cons were a lot longer than the pros. Like I get the concept of not affecting the recreational game. That's really important. Like amateur golf is in a really good position. This implementation, the idea they've come up with, is probably the easiest to implement at local level. They obviously had some problems when they went down looking at the golf club route. They had to, if they wanted to reduce the sweet spot, they would go into 3-wood territory, and then that would actually 3-woods would then be longer than drivers. So this is obviously the best solution on the table in their opinion. I've actually got a different solution, which I think would be better and easier and cheaper for everybody. We can come on to that.
Look forward to that.
At the end of the
I'll look forward to this brainwave, Joel.
He's just had
it. I don't know why they haven't thought of it. But there's a lot of reasons why the golf ball's going. People are hitting it further. It's not just the golf ball, the technology and golf club. It's players generally on tour. They're a lot taller. They're younger. They're fitter. Fairways are faster. Rough shorter. Launch monitors are becoming more prevalent. People are understanding how they hit it further. And this rule kind of covers all those areas. I just think when you look at the data, like the prevalence or the emphasis on distance when it comes to people winning golf tournaments is actually not as high as people probably think it is. So I don't know if you've seen Mark Brodie publish a report. Obviously, Mark Brodie being the pioneer of strokes gained, and there's some interesting findings within that suggest that actually distance isn't as important at winning golf tournaments on the PGA Tour as people probably think it is. So let me reel off a couple of facts that might
Joel's come with the facts today for his side of the argument, and I like it a lot.
It's interesting. So, for example, driving's contribution to winning tournaments has changed by less than 2% since 2004, and winners in the week they win gain 18% of their scoring advantage from driving, which has changed by less than 2%, which Mark Brodie deems as statistically insignificant. So, and the final point I would make is that Martin Slumbers, during that press conference, which was a great press conference, I don't know if you sat in on that with the USGA and the RNA, he said something along the lines of the balance between skill and technology has got out of kilter, and I don't agree with that. I think being able to hit the ball a long way is a skill, and the good thing about this model local rule is the longer hitters will still be the longer hitters, so they still have their advantage. But what he says, I think what he's essentially saying is that golf has become a bit of a driver wedge game, and that the skill of hitting a long iron is becoming less important. Actually, when you look at the data, one final stat for you is that the number of approach shots on the PGA Tour hit between 50 and 150 yards has actually reduced since 2004. So I think
great set of stats there, Joel, backing up my hatred of this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think like on the face of it, you look at some of the hitting distances, like average ball speed, average distance. Yes, it is increasing, and scoring average is reducing slightly. But when you look at the effect of driving on winning tournaments, it's not as prevalent as it probably is, as people think it is.
A great case there, Joel. Now, Neil, I know you are Golf Monthly's voice of reason, or perhaps just I think you're going to be able to sort of give us some balance to this, because this is a debate. Before I let you come in here, I'm going to read out some of TaylorMade's response to this. So Titleist and Bridgestone also released a statement on this. Obviously, they have a slight vested interest, but TaylorMade said, and the key part of their statement for me was, we believe a large part of golf's appeal is the underlying sense of I can do that too. And having the professionals using the same stuff that you can is actually quite fun and an appealing part of it. So taking that on board and what Joel said, what are your opinions on this model local rule potentially coming into play in 2026?
Yeah, I would take everything that Joel has said there, and I wouldn't disagree with any of it, much of it. I totally get all of the points, and particularly the point for me, I think, around probably the amount of money that would be required to bring this sort of thing in, to get all of the manufacturers to design effectively a new golf ball for a very few number of golfers is going to cost quite a bit of money. And then what happens then to the price of the equipment that people have to purchase in order to play the game, that could potentially have a negative impact. But then I also look at it from the perspective of, if, as Joel said right at the beginning of his bit, if they don't do something now, where are we going to be in 20 years' time? You know, I don't know whether there is an answer to this question, or it's an easy answer. And I'm not sure that the golf ball is that restricting the golf ball is the way to do it. But one of my frustrations, I think, with professional golf is when you get to a big tournament and you're invested and you're right at the end of it, and you're like, oh, this person has got a one-shot lead and they've got that 480-yard 18th hole to play, which is an absolute beast. This is going to be a real test. They are now so good, A, at hitting the ball a long way, and B, at handling the pressure, that they just obliterate that final hole. And the amount of times where the brutal final hole at a big tournament has been reduced to a driver and a wedge. Now, I'm not sure that's the fault of the golf ball. I'm not sure it's the fault of the driver. I think that it's so many contributing factors that these players are so good under pressure, and you are watching the best players in that tournament at the very end of the tournament who are their confidence is high because they're playing really well. They're hitting it miles, and they've reduced a really difficult hole to a driver and a middle short iron and made it look dead easy. And then the other parts of the proposal that kind of I raised an eyebrow at was the relatively small amount that they were looking to roll the golf ball back.
Yeah.
So just restricting, for instance, let's say Rory, whoever it might be, by 15 yards just didn't seem like an awful lot to me. But having said all of that I said, I sort of do understand, and I do get what the ruling bodies are saying about protecting the game and trying to ensure that they have a really watchable tour product for people, because that has a role to play in growing the game and ensuring that the balance of skill is right, that you've got players hitting all different shots. So if we could get to a point where the players are not hitting, and again, this is another one. Sorry, this is Tony. One of my bugbears with professional golf is that so many of them hit a baby fade off the tee because that's the safest shot.
Yeah,
I'd love to see a bit more. I would love to see a bit more creativity. Now, I don't know how you go about getting that. It's really difficult. But someone like Rory or Justin Thomas or Jordan Spieth, John Rahm, whoever it might be, that's got all the shots in their locker, how often do you see them hit all the shots? Is that the fault of the equipment? Is it the fault of the courses they play? Is it the conditions that they're playing in, because they're always playing somewhere sunny and nice and warm? And is that even a problem?
That's my issue with this whole conversation. And you both made really good points there on either side of the argument, I think. But there might be people watching and listening, let us know. I don't have a problem with the distance. Good for them. Kudos. Maybe the solution, if we don't want to see tournaments won at 25 under par, I mean, is that a problem? I don't really mind about that either. Good for you.
Make par 69 instead of 72. There you go.
Something like that. Let's grow the rough up. I don't know. We've seen, obviously, Augusta's moved the 13th tee back a good chunk. I can't remember off the top of my head, 40, 50 yards to make that par 5 a bit tougher. Is that the answer? Is there a problem at all with distance? I really don't mind it too much. Joel, I do now. You piqued my interest when you said you've got some sort of solution for all of us. And if anyone from the USGA and RNA are watching, you're welcome for what's about to come. Come on, Joel, help us out here with some common sense thinking.
I mean, I'm sure they considered this, but I struggle to see a negative of this. So my solution would be to reduce tee height.
You had mentioned this once before to me. Yeah,
whether it's an inch or whatever it might be, because I think one of the main reasons why golfers are hitting the ball further is because they're able to spin it less, and the reason they're able to spin it less is because they can hit up on the ball a lot more, and it's been proven by launch monitors that is one of the key ingredients to hitting the ball further. If you lower the tee height to whatever it might be, obviously they need to do some testing, etc. It would immediately reduce the ability of players to, their attack angles would become a bit more level, maybe not up or maybe not down, but they'd be more level. Spin would increase and the distance potential would come down. So, I mean, they would need to be possibly quite dramatic to have an impact, but that reduction in spin, and maybe that wouldn't have a big enough impact on distance, but it would certainly be a really easy thing to implement in the short term that would knock off a few yards, and it could be investigated further.
Playing devil's advocate, how do you police that?
I think you have a person on every tee box at a tournament with a small measuring tape, and they just gently come up as they tee it up, and they go, "Yeah, you're in the margins there."
You just have a maximum tee length that you're allowed to use, and that's
what goes in the bag. Yeah. I mean,
that is very easy. An interesting idea.
Yeah, I like it. But again, I think this was to Neil's point earlier about even what this model local rule is suggesting now is that it's only taking 15 yards off, 10 yards off, and you said there, Joe, it might not take that much off, really. So why are we bothering? And now I've circled back to why do we care about how far golfers hit it at the minute? Do you actually think it's bad for the game either that golfers are hitting it really far? That's what I'd like to know. And I see your point earlier, Neil, of everything becomes driver wedge. But that's
right now. I don't. I love it. I was watching you referenced the World Match Play. They played that par 4 over water that a lot of them can hit, and the shots that they hit on that hole were ridiculous. Like the amount of people that are hitting shots that are coming in softly and landing and stopping quite close to the flag. That's amazing to watch. It's fantastic to watch, and if anything, that's the sort of stuff that's going to engage viewers, isn't it? That's the sort of stuff that makes a nice clip on Instagram, makes a
Exactly.
nice vertical video for people to look at.
We're recording this the day after the Thursday of the match play, and I didn't see Rory's shot live, but I woke up this morning on Twitter, 1.5 million views already of that shot he hit into the 18th today. That moves the needle for the PGA Tour. That gets people interested in golf. Justin Thomas said we don't make the net smaller for basketball players. We didn't make Usain Bolt run in treacle. This is the beauty of sport, is that people are sort of chasing the next level, being the top 0.1% of what they do. And if we take that away from golf, I'm worried it might damage the sport as a whole.
I would just add that I don't envy the R&A and USGA on this. And I think that it is a really difficult topic to figure out a solution for. And it is incumbent on them to make sure that they're upholding all of the sort of traditional values of the sport. So I sort of don't want to criticize them too much.
No, it's
because
fair.
I understand where
they have
they're
to do
coming
something.
from. It feels like, but do they have to do something? I think that in 20 years' time, when you look down the road, you might well look back to this point and think to yourself, why didn't they act?
Well,
Now, so I can sort of understand it. I'm not sure of all the different levers you can pull to help this particular problem. I just don't know. I'm not as strident on this as so many people are on social. That people like you, Dan, who come out and go, I hate it.
Yes.
I don't maybe fit into that box, but at the same time, I'm not 100% sure it is right. But then I look at the alternatives. That what Joel's just said is interesting. I like that. I also like the idea of reducing maybe the number of clubs they have in the bag. Just take a couple of clubs out.
Yeah, don't mind that.
14 clubs is a lot, isn't it?
On your lever pulling analogy there of what they can pull to help this situation, I would pull the lever that grows the rough up a bit, that makes courses a bit tougher. I don't see why that's so. If you do miss a fairway, you're stuffed. But yeah, it's perhaps this debate, Joel, coming from the fact that we are worried about what might happen in 20. We're worried about the thing that doesn't happen yet, and that all of a sudden a 400-yard carry becomes stock. Right. That the thing where this is coming from, is our sort of anxiety about the future.
Yeah, like definitely. I think if we keep going as we are, the distances that people are hitting it will be unsustainable on the golf courses that they're playing. Like, so for example, driver distance on holes where players would use a driver has increased by 8.2 yards per decade. So clearly there is if we continue that, that's not going to be sustainable. Something needs to be done. I agree with you. I do think distance gains could be better mitigated through course setup, and there's so many ways they could do that, whether it's growing the rough up, making the fairways narrower, the greens smaller, placing more of a premium on hitting the fairways. Ultimately, we need to stop making the golf courses longer, because longer golf courses rewards longer hitters. An increased emphasis on driving distance. So like,
that's a bit counterintuitive, actually, isn't it? Popping that tee back on at Augusta, for example.
It does feel like these changes are kind of attacking the ways that the best players in the world are playing some of the most iconic holes in golf. And, the powers that be are thinking, they shouldn't be knocking the ball on the green on the 18th at St Andrews or the 10th at Riviera. But actually, that's just the evolution. That's just change. That's just what happens. And a lot of that is down to other things like the wind or the firmness of the fairways and things like that. So it really only kind of applies to a very small percentage of golf courses that have ambitions to host elite or high-level professional tournaments.
A small number of golfers, as well.
Yeah, and that's
a number of golfers. Yeah, and if you think about it, like rolling back the ball doesn't really open it up to more courses being able to host these events, because they don't really have the money or the space or the infrastructure around it to host events anyway. So again, it's another reason to think, why are we doing this?
It feels like a storm in a teacup of the 1% of all of golf's existence, i.e. the elite courses and the elite golfers, and we're chatting about this now. Whereas I feel like perhaps a new fan to the game who watched Full Swing documentary on Netflix over February is now sat watching the match play and just loving what they're seeing and not worrying about this and just enjoying the sport and the innovation that's coming from it.
Yeah, when I showed my son that shot that Bryson hit that you talked about before, when he cleared the lake on par 5,
and he's giving it the old big double point. Yeah,
he thought that was absolutely immense.
and that's great.
And it's hard to disagree. And then there was also one at the Ryder Cup where he just hit the ball on a totally different line to anybody else, and it's just like, well, that's just gone straight into the deep cabbage, and it just appeared from nowhere on the middle
And
of the
listen,
fairway.
I think at that same tournament he topped a hybrid off the tee in the final round, and that was great to see. He was still fallible, and that's the beauty of the sport.
Can I just add one small
Sure.
point? Something that came in yesterday from Arcos was looking at how amateur distances have changed or haven't changed over the last 5 years, and obviously they've got a pretty big data set.
Yeah,
I think they looked at, I think it was 20 million drives hit between 2018 and 2022, and for men, driving distance, basically for men and for women, driving distance has gone down, but only fractionally. So it's gone down over that period of time, but it's very, very similar to what it was.
Interesting.
So it is really interesting, and part of the excitement of golf is hitting the ball a long way, and part of the skill in golf is hitting the ball a long way whilst keeping it on the golf course. But then,
it's fascinating. But I think what we
sides.
have done here in this chat, which opened my eyes a little bit, and maybe I'm off the hate fence and onto the dislike fence for now, but there's still the RNA and the USGA have to look after the game, and there has to still be this limit between skill and technology, doesn't there? That we have to acknowledge it and not poo-poo this too much, as perhaps I am, and dismiss it, because it is a problem. It's about how we go about it. A silly one I would bring in is limit gym time. So like max 2 hours of gym per week for Rory McIlroy. Because if everyone looked like me, sort of 5'11" and not that heavy, wet through, you're not hitting the ball much further, are you? So let's limit the gym time. So I'm going to go for.
Can I just make one final point?
Go on, Joel. Wrap us up.
Is that I don't agree with the whole bifurcation is bad, like unification is good for the game, because if you look at the equipment a lot of the players are using, a lot of it is stuff that people can't buy at retail. The amount of tour only clubs out there, it's like bifurcation kind of really already exists. The amount, you look at Pro V1, Pro V1 X, I think there's 20 different versions on the USGA conforming list, whether it's left dot, left dash, all the different versions. I know left dash has recently been put into retail, but I think there's a lot more tour only stuff that's used by the world's best players that people probably know about, and that bifurcation does to a degree already exist. So I don't really kind of accept that argument that the ball manufacturer is making.
That's an interesting point I hadn't thought of, actually, Joel.
And also just to sort of add to that point, Joel, if the longest players in the world started to hit the ball a bit shorter, then would we all feel like we were playing the game more in a more similar way than we do currently? So the average driving distance for men is 225.9 and for women is 177. So that's a massive difference between those numbers and the sort of numbers we're talking about on tour. So they are, I mean, yes, we're playing the same game, but they are playing a totally different game in terms of how far they hit the ball.
Yeah.
So should we get caught up in the whole thing of we're all playing the same sport, because it's like, well, they're so much better than we are. They hit the ball so much further than we do. I don't know. I'm going around in circles on this.
And I think this actually encourages further bifurcation, because I think if this model local rule is adopted, we'll see manufacturers bringing out lower spinning drivers to try and get the ball going a bit further. So even we see players on tour. Exactly, they'll always find a way. Players on tour, they have the speed to be and the attack angle to be able to deliver low spin, and therefore they can opt for more forgiving heads that gives them a bit more playability. But with this ball going shorter, they're going to give up some of that accuracy in search of getting more distance and a bit more risk. And they will be using lower spin drivers. They'll do a lot more practice of striking the middle of the face. They'll really work on their driving. As you say, they'll adapt. We're humans. We adapt.
I was just about to say that. We're innovative creatures, aren't we? We want to be better.
So maybe the distance...
And you don't want to stifle that innovation either, do you? You don't want
it will feel like me when I play my PGA 2K23 game on the PlayStation, and my little career man who I made can only hit it 296, because that's just the way the game's programmed at the minute for me. And I just feel if all of a sudden every driver's going 317 or whatever, I know it'll be different in conditions, but it would just feel unnatural, slightly manufactured, slightly unreal. I don't know. We could talk about this for hours, I think, chaps. And I think there's a lot of things people need to ask themselves, really, who are watching. Do you care about how far the pros hit it? Do you want to feel like you can do the same thing that pros can do if the equipment is there for you? Do you want to see harder golf courses? Do you mind if someone wins a 25 under par? Do you want to see Rory McIlroy hit a green for 350 yards out? These are the things we have to ask before we worry about this distance thing. There is a problem, and I think we've acknowledged that as well. We'd love to hear what you think, because we've been chatting away for a while about this now. Do you care? Do you want to see this? Have you got any other good ideas, like perhaps my gym time idea, or Joel's perhaps more sensible shortening of the tee, which I very much liked? Let us know what you think about that and this debate in general, because I think it's got a lot of people talking. But I think I'll about wrap it up for this episode of the Gear of the Week show. Joel, thank you very much for your insights, as always. Very enjoyable.
Always a pleasure.
Neil, thank you very much. Great debating with you this morning.
Thank you, Dan. Cheers.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.